So today's all about planning for growth in 2025. Use this as a chance to think about how you're going to approach growth. I think that you'll find the way we think about it to be fairly practical and simple. And so, yeah, let's get into it. So today we are going to set clear goals and targets for 2025. We'll talk a little bit about KPIs and tracking to achieve those outcomes, but not too much. We're not going to get too much in the weeds, but we will map out a plan for how you can accomplish the goals and targets you set. We'll talk a little bit about budget and give you a tool to help you with that. We'll briefly talk about channels and then also some important trends around AI, which I'll add as an addendum at the end. And then we'll just set you up for a strong 2025. Of course, this image isn't showing, but that's what it looks like. Anyways, so this is a workbook that we'll include in our email after, and I'll go through it here as well. But I'm actually just going to put this in the chat so that you can access it. I think you guys can see the chat. So there it is. That's the workbook that we're going to be working out of. And so let's get back into it. I'll share the resources in the Zoom chat that way. All right, so 1 second here. All right, sharing the screen. Okay, so that was the first slide, second slide, third slide's right here. And who are we? Who am I? Why bother listening? I've been in the industry a long time, and we work with dozens of bars, restaurants, breweries, cafes, and bakeries. And so we just have a more of a 360-degree view. It's one of my favorite metaphors is when you're inside the jar, it's really hard to see the label. And so there's that. And the long and short of it is we're absolutely obsessed with driving results for bars and restaurants. That's really all I do is I just focus on getting guests and driving wins for restaurants. So Michael isn't here. So we work with, as I mentioned, dozens of bar and restaurant owners. Here are some of our pals. And this is my co-founder, Michael. And we're on a mission to double the sales of 500 Canadian restaurants over the next 5 to 10 years, which is no small feat. So let's get right into it. So first things first, we want to set clear goals. And Brian Tracy famously said, success is goals, all else is commentary. And so we want to be really clear on what those goals actually are. And another one of my favorite metaphors is if there's no direction set, no wind is a good wind. And so we have to actually be able to set the direction of the sales in order to have like a winning trajectory. And so that's what we're going to start with right here. And yeah, so clear goals are basically a wind in your sales with direction. So I'm going to head over to our workbook here, which you can make a little copy and do the same thing. But so what we want to clarify is where are you at right now? What is your current reality? And because we have a process called the road mapping process when we get started with someone. And part of that is like a lot of people set goals without any clarity on where they are right now. And it's really hard to get somewhere if you don't know where you are right now or you're not clear on it. And by the way, a lot of this work is ongoing. You got to continuously refine the plan. Think of it as a living document, but you want to be clear on what is your average monthly revenue right now? How many guests are you getting per month? Something else you might want to consider, maybe you aren't, but how many events or catering bookings are you getting in a given month? And the reason for this is often one of the highest sales events that restaurants have. And if we're clear, oh, you know what? I'm getting like on average 2, 3 catering or big group bookings, like really big group bookings. We're talking like at least 20 people. In 2025, we can work to impact that and add, say, three more bookings, 5 more bookings, 10 more bookings. That can make a big impact over the course of the year. And the other key metrics you'll want to dive into, and you might not do it right now, but this is the framework, right? You can take this with your team and expand on it then. 40 minutes isn't enough time for us to really go super deep. We just want to provide the framework and give you a new way to think about growth. What is your average check value? What is the average conversion rate on offers? And this is a big thing. Like a lot of restaurants don't necessarily even make offers. And I'm not talking about discounts. I'm talking about what we call a magnetic goodwill offer, an offer that's actually generous and positions the brand as confident because you're not, but discounts like selling from your heels. Whereas if you give someone, you say, hey, have a free something, maybe a signature item, that's confident, right? Because drug dealers are the first hits on the house because we know once you get one hit, you're going to come back. Plus it builds reciprocity and goodwill in folks who take you up on that. And so you want to have clarity on what is the conversion rate. And we'll dive into this in one of our calculators coming up here in a bit. And then also similarly, if you're building up a lead list of folks who are interested in catering or events, what's your close rate on those inquiries? So you want to take some time and get clear on these numbers numbers. You don't need too many more numbers than that. You just want to, that gives you a pretty good picture of how things are going. If this wasn't a webinar on growth and marketing in particular, we'd probably also want something on profitability, which I'm sure you have anyways. But yeah, when you look at your P&L, that's pretty obvious. And then, so let's see here. So once we have clarity on that, we also want to get clear on what is the long-term vision. And it's not even that long-term, it's 1 year out. At the end of 2025, and this is a question that I find very helpful to shape this. Imagine that we're sitting here, we're on this same workshop this time next year, and you are really excited about the progress that you've made in 2025. What has to have had happen for you to be so excited about that progress? And just you want to root the answer to that question in these numbers. What is annual and monthly revenue? How many guests are you getting on a monthly basis? What is the average check value? And then also how many catering and event bookings are you getting? Because these are all numbers that you can impact, right? With marketing. So what is your goal for 2025? Where do you want to be at revenue wise? And understand, once your average check value, you can understand how many guests you're going to need to actually get there. And next, I'd just like to briefly talk about budget. I'll show you a little spreadsheet that we'll sometimes use, but it's maybe a bit too robust. I think a lot of this stuff can just be done on the back of a napkin and with your team and continuously meeting about this stuff. But one rule of thumb when it comes to growth and expansion is for the budget. If we're just budgeting 5% of our revenue, so let's say we're doing $1 million a year at our restaurant, and so 5% is 50 grand a year. That's about enough for us to maintain. We're gonna maintain our current market share, but I wouldn't expect to see like things sloping up, candidly. Now, if we want to grow slow but steady, it's closer to 10%. That's generally a healthy budget for a restaurant to allocate towards marketing. And then that's generally what we can see things sloping up like this. And then finally, if you want aggressive growth, we will usually see this in newer establishments or maybe establishments that are rebranding. 10 to 20% of revenue. 20% is quite high, candidly, but there are some folks who are just like, they want to eat up as much market share as they possibly can. And if you're a concept like bubble tea or something, that can actually be fairly sustainable because the margins are astronomical on bubble tea. And so we have this little spreadsheet planner here. Just bear with me 1 second because I don't think this link is going to work. Actually, it might. Just 1 second here. Here we go. Okay, so actually, I'm going to gloss over this. I'm going to send you this in the resource and you can play with this on your own. But basically, it's if your revenue goal or target is $1 million, you need to be doing 83-ish in change to on a monthly basis to get there. And so you want to plug in some of these things. So say your average check value is $45. You need 1,852 checks over the course of, I think that's a year. Yeah, over the course of a year in order to get to where you need to go. And we also break it down by offers. If you're running offers, how many people do you need to get to take you up on those offers and in order to hit your goal? Now, obviously, all of your revenue isn't going to just come from driving offers, but it's useful to look at. Now, what I actually want to share with you more than this is our next little nifty calculator that I'll share with you. This can be helpful in just like thinking through your budget. But here, let me just find something. I got a So this is our cost of marketing calculator. So I want you to think of this in terms of, and let me just make sure this is the next slide. Yes, it is. Okay. So restaurant cost of marketing, right? So this one is really useful, I find. It's simpler than the last one. And it gives you like a really healthy look at your numbers in terms of marketing and advertising, right? And it also factors in numbers that a lot of folks forget about. When it comes to the management investment, that maybe are you paying yourself for your time to manage this stuff? Are you paying a team member? Are you paying a freelancer, an agency or something like that? If so, how much are you spending? And then ad spend, right? A quick diatribe on that. I actually think the agency model for most restaurants is super broken, and we'll find out why. Most agencies will charge anywhere from 3 to 7K a month, right? Which is, let's just say it's 5K. Okay. That's pretty significant investment. One way you could think about it is how much would I spend on a CMO or something like that. But because restaurants, the margins are usually lower, they tend not to have that much extra money in the budget to throw out an agency. And especially if that agency isn't super accountable necessarily to revenue driving results, right? And so we actually want to spend as much as we possibly can on ads if the ads are working, right? And so that's where we look at what is our ad spend. And then the average cost per lead. And per lead, that means someone who's raising their hand either for an offer, maybe you're running a buy one, get one, or maybe you're running a catered event or like a catered event giveaway or something like that. Something we do often is office lunches for up to 15 to 20 people, which doesn't, in cost of goods, doesn't tend to cost a lot to give away, but generates quite a bit of interest. And so maybe you're getting folks to sign up for your offer for $1.30. Let's say your offer conversion rate is 15%. And then when people come in to the restaurant, the average per head spend is, say, $50. And then these are the two things that people always forget about when they're thinking about, oh, like they'll stop here. They'll say, okay, I spent this much in ads and this many people came in and this is what they spent. And therefore that is all I got. But that is wildly underestimating the actual impact of a campaign like this, because none of us are in the restaurant game to get a guest one time. We're in the game to get a guest again and again and again, right? And so you want to factor in, okay, and it's okay if you don't know these numbers yet. That could be part of your plan for 2025, is getting clarity on these numbers. And so if the repeat rate on an annual basis is only 2 times, which is pretty low, usually we generally see average repeat rate is 6 to 9 times per year. It really depends on the concept, right? If you're a pizza joint, sometimes people are back there every single week or a couple times a week. Whereas if you're a really fancy fine dining spot where folks only go for special occasions, that could be like one or 2 times a year. And then finally, you also have to consider when people are happy, how many people they refer, right? And then that creates a flywheel effect. Okay, and then I just want to bring you down here. And so in this case, so we're trying to get the cost of marketing down to 10% or lower. This is no small feat, by the way. So if your numbers aren't in here, don't fret. But because this is all we do and our goal is to create like the ultimate growth system, we want to get a system that drives meaningful revenue results where it costs the business 10% total. And so let's play around with some of these numbers here. Okay, so $5,000 for an agency cost is pretty crazy. Let's see what happens if we bring that down to 1,500. Okay, that brings us down to 17.34% cost of marketing. Now let's see here. What else can we impact? What else can we impact? Cost per lead. $1.30 is pretty good cost per lead, no matter what the offer is. So I'm gonna keep that there. But you know what? We could probably up the conversion rate by sending more reminder messages, maybe telling more stories, building the brand, telling the brand story a bit better, and and building trust in the market. Let's say we get that up to 20%. Boom. Okay. Now we're getting closer. Now, let's say what happens if we increase our ad spend? Okay. Now we're getting closer. Let's see what happens if we increase it even more. Okay. I just want to see what 7K. And by the way, so you need to spend, if that's the only thing you're maneuvering is that, let's just go to 11K. There, boom. Okay. So now this campaign, if you have these numbers, makes phenomenal sense, right? And a lot of people be like, I'm not spending $11,000 a month on ads. You might want to consider it. And I'm not saying tomorrow, but like the biggest one of the biggest challenges in the restaurant industry is that there's really small piecemeal thinking, and that's no one's fault. It's like the nature of the beast. We tend to have lower margins and we're often putting out fires. There are a lot of moving parts, but if we can set ourselves up well in 2025, maybe towards the end of 2025, you've been incrementally increasing that budget month over month because you're seeing the wins, you're seeing the results. Maybe at the end of 2025, you start to get closer and you're like, okay, I'm getting there. But the other things you can impact are repeat rates. And so this could be done through email marketing, through text campaigns, bringing guests back in more often. What happens if we get people coming back, say, 5 times a year? Boom, brings it way down. And then you could, I'm not saying necessarily, but you could probably bring that down to 8K. Boom. Oh, boom. There we go. Maybe even 5K, right? But at the same time, as you bring the ad spend down, you're going to be bringing in less revenue. And then the number of referrals, right? This is so like most restaurants don't do anything around referrals, like asking happy guests. For instance, if a guest comes to your restaurant 3 times or more, they probably like it quite a bit. And if we can segment our list based on people who've been 3 times or more, which is completely doable, maybe not with your current setup, but it's absolutely doable, you can build a referral request campaign. Similarly, you can build a review request campaign because that's like word of mouth on steroids in a way. If you have a campaign where it's like, hey, for every person you send our way, well, boom, we'll give you something. And then you create a mechanism to make that happen. Let's say you bump up referrals per single happy guest that comes in by, let's say you get 4. Boom, it brings it way down, right? So there are all these ways that marketing can impact the numbers to make it make really good sense. So I'll give you this little resource here. I'll put it in the Zoom, and you can go ahead and make a copy of it. So Zoom, 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 boom. There we go. All right. So let's go back to the little presentation here. All right. So we have a little marketing budget planner. Honestly, your marketing budget can be distilled to use a spreadsheet. It's pretty helpful. The cost of marketing helps you make sense of campaigns, especially when you're building your database, you're extending offers to the market, or you're looking to build up, say, business to business leads for event and catering orders. Now let's get into the actual strategy. Okay. And every year I rethink how to grow and how to make it as simple as possible. So let's get into this. Okay. So the way I see it, there are 3 growth prongs, and they can be simpler than they sound. So the first prong I'll actually draw your attention to is brand storytelling, because I believe it is the most important one. And we'll get into that. The next one are revenue initiatives. And we break these down every 2 months. And I'll explain what the goal of a revenue initiative is. It's bumping revenue up by 5% month in, month out, which doesn't sound like a lot, which I like, right? Because it makes growth approachable. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to grow like 20% this month. And it's, you can, but why don't we see what we can do to impact revenue by 5%? And if we do that every single month over the course of the whole year, we've grown by 80% just from the revenue initiatives alone. And of course, there are market forces, there's seasonality, there's all kinds of things that will make it probably challenging to be like, did I grow 5%? But the mindset, I believe, is most important. And then finally, nailing the fundamentals and establishing a solid foundation for sustainable growth. So I'll get into the details of these. And also in the workbook, which I shared, there is just really simple checklists that you can follow. Just what does this stuff look like in practice? How do we make it simple? Every quarter for the brand storytelling, we focus on one aspect of the brand story. And I'll give really a concrete way to think about this. Every 2 months, we focus on one revenue initiative. And then finally, each month, we ensure that we're nailing the fundamentals, which is really just a matter of executing against a checklist. And I would recommend it's probably not you as the business owner executing that checklist. Have someone who can be accountable to that checklist and who can report on what they're seeing and what's going on so you can keep on moving forward. So what is brand? Well, the origin of a brand comes from folks like branding their animals. And over time, people would be able to tell distinctions and differences based on how that animal was branded. And so this Ogilvy quote I love: any damn fool can put on a deal, but it takes genius, faith, and perseverance to create a brand, right? So it's like anyone can advertise a discount, but it takes creativity, it takes thought, it takes a long time to build a brand. And so how can we increase our surface area for success, both in the long-term brand and also today? That's what this 3-pronged approach is all about. And the way I think of brand, because I'm always how can I make this really simple to think about? Firstly, it's the experience that others have with our brand. It's people inside the 4 walls of your restaurant. It's them tasting your food. It's them interacting with your servers and bartenders. And so that's experience. And so part of marketing is like, how much of that can we capture? But really, where the marketing steps in is at the storytelling and the education piece. So telling stories and educating the market this is what I consider brand building content. And what does storytelling actually look like? And there's a phenomenal book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And this is the framework that he championed in that book. And I'll let you go over this in your own time. You can have a look at the slides, you can think about it. But every story, like most brands are positioning themselves as the hero. It's, hey, we make the best sandwiches in the land. But the major distinction I got from Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand framework is that actually when we position ourselves as the hero, we actually create a conflict of interest in the mind of our guest, because everyone is the hero of their own story. And so what we actually want to do is position ourselves as the guide. And so this framework helps us make sense of that. And this is a really powerful exercise to think about when it comes to just like your internal team documents. What is the story of our sandwich shop or whatever? So there's that. And then the way we found most practical to apply story to our content and to our marketing is what we call the 7 core story video framework. And so When I talk about every quarter, what we do is we create one video asset. All right. So that's maybe a minute to a 2 minute video. It doesn't need to be super long, but that minute to 2 minute video is focusing either on the backstory, the experience, the philosophy, the vision of where you're going, the shiny place that you're taking everybody in the future, how it's made. So this is the education stuff, something around the challenge that you've had, and how that is rooted in like the plan, where it is that you want to go. And because if all we're doing is talking about how awesome we are, it's very hard to relate with that, right? Because I often say pain is the connective tissue of humans, right? Like when someone talks about something that's painful, we instantly connect with that, right? Because we can relate to it. If all you were doing was saying, "Oh, I'm in pain," then you'd be a victim. And it's the plan, it's the action-oriented nature of it that puts us into a story that's interesting. And then, of course, the solution and the results. What was the solution that you came up with to some kind of a problem or challenge, and what was the result? And so we always think, so when we do our quarterly story asset planning sessions, we use this framework to help us. And this is in your workbook as well. And then just another practical point here is we create that one asset, and then what we'll do is we'll turn it into a bunch of shorter clips that will run as awareness ads. So the local market is always seeing the story driven or educational content from that bar or restaurant, brewery, cafe. Next, bi-monthly revenue initiatives. As I mentioned, a 5% revenue bump every single month for 12 months is 80% revenue growth for the year. Here are some examples of revenue initiatives. And I have one for every single month. Maybe you want to do one every single month, but I think that one every 2 months gives us a good amount of runway to really test that idea out or test that initiative out. So month one, it could be some kind of an influencer and foodie event. Month two could be something around your catering and event promotion. Month three, you could partner with a bunch of other local businesses. Maybe you come up with, I don't know, like a passport campaign or something, and you run that. In month four, it's okay. We're getting close to the warm weather. What are we going to do? What are some off the wall summer menu things that we're going to put out there and drive awareness around? Month five could be featuring your guests and their stories and why they love coming to your bar or restaurant. That's some of the most powerful collateral you can develop. And so I hope you can see that as you plan these out in advance, like you might not right off the top of your head be like, I don't know what guest stories I would necessarily share right away. Or on the other hand, you might be like, I like right off the top of my head, I know 20 people who would be perfect for that. And if you do have that, honestly, I'd probably recommend bumping this up to month one. Anyways, so pay for A's, like a university attraction plan. So you could have university students bring in their good GPAs or whatever, or their maybe high school students, if you want a younger demographic, to bring in their A's and they get like a complimentary something. And yeah, anyways, so it could be anything, but you want to be able to run things that you're able to see, okay, this is where the cost of marketing calculator is super handy, right? Each one of these, you should probably have some kind of an idea of how much attention you're generating through them, how many leads or how much you're building your database up by, how many redemptions you're getting in. So you can have a sense of how much should I spend and how much should I generate back in revenue. Yeah, that's that. Again, I'll let you think about that on your own. But if you're doing one of these revenue initiatives every other month, that's going to be some powerful stuff. So finally, what does reviewing the execution of the fundamentals look like, or nailing the fundamentals? So the way we look at it, and I try to simplify this as much as possible. So at GuestGetter, we do all this stuff for our clients. And so it's like we have a big ass checklist. And I just think sharing the entire thing would probably be overwhelming. So we simplified it. And so nailing the fundamentals, this is what I consider nailing the fundamentals. So guest engagement, I also call this brand and relationship building, right? Because it's like a big part of what we do is we prioritize building up the restaurant's database of names, phone numbers, emails, and birthdays. And then what do we do with it? We stimulate relationships with it. We send email newsletters. We'll send text campaigns from time to time, and we stimulate the relationship. We keep things going. We actually aim to lead the relationship. Hey, here's something cool that we're doing, and here's the next step you could take, that kind of thing. So that's guest engagement beyond the four walls. Obviously, you have the most potent guest engagement is what happens inside the four walls, but most restaurants are actually pretty good at that part. What they struggle with is what happens when guests leave, right? Most restaurants aren't even collecting guest information, my favorite analogy is that's like you see someone at a coffee shop and you're like, oh, I want to go on a date with them, and you ask them and they're like, they miraculously say yes, and you go on a date and then you don't exchange contact information, what do you think the odds are that you're ever going to see that person again? Maybe if you live in a small town, it's possible. But anyways, you need to collect the information to keep the relationship going. SEO management. So we call this local visibility boosting. And SEO, search engine optimization, it's actually pretty straightforward at the local level. It's time consuming, it's boring, but it's very effective. And so this is stuff like your Google business profile, optimizing that, which is really just a function of making sure that you fully fill out every piece of it. You put content up on it, you share images on an ongoing basis, you respond to Q&As. And also press releases are very effective. So you can use a tool called Signal Genesis. There are other press releases, but what they'll do is they'll basically create like some kind of a little article and then they'll disseminate it across the web. And then that will just help build up your SEO juice. It'll build up backlinks. And then you also want to make sure that your citations are up to date, consistent, then you have a lot of them across the internet. Anyways, I don't want to get too into the weeds. If any of this is unclear at the end of this, please just hit me up, Kyle@guestgator.com. I'm happy to go into more detail. We also have an SEO checklist for bars and restaurants that we could send your way. Reputation building. I'm really passionate about this because I believe that getting more reviews is actually the highest leverage, highest impact marketing activity a local business can do. Honestly, if you were to forget everything else, I would just obsess over getting as many reviews as you can, because it's the only marketing activity that as we do more of it, not only does more reviews give us more visibility and attention because it is a very important ranking factor for search engines. So as you get more reviews, you will be rewarded with higher rankings in search and maps, but you also increase the conversion rate on that traffic, right? That's amazing that you can do both those things in one fell swoop as you generate more and more reviews. So I'm very passionate about that. And I include birthday and loyalty programs in reputation building because these are a couple of things that leave people with the warm and fuzzies. And the more often we leave people with the warm and fuzzies, the more positively they're gonna think about our brand. And the more positively they think about our brand, the more often they come back. And I also include birthday and loyalty programs in here because, as I mentioned, huge like gap in restaurants is generally they're not building up a database, they're not collecting guest information. A birthday program and a loyalty program help us solve for that. And so we'll maybe say, hey, get a free burger on your birthday. And then that becomes a sign that we can put inside the four walls. It becomes something we can put in the billfold, something we put at the point of sale and train the staff to say, hey, are you in our birthday program? Or, hey, are you in our loyalty program? If not, blah, scan this code and sign up. Right? And then boom, we start to solve for not getting an inflow of guest data, right? I want to see that guest database like building up like this, because as we have that inflow of guest information, there's so much incredible things and experiences that we can create for them, right? That is how I see reputation building. Event catering attraction, like really simply put, it's actually having a sales page on your website that says, hey, we cater, and do you want it? You might even offer, if someone's interested in catering, give them a cool offer, right? It's like that first hits on the house. And catering and events, not only is it like the highest ticket revenue event that bars and restaurants tend to have, it's also the most conducive to recurring revenue, because a lot of businesses, they'll have catered lunches every week, every 2 weeks, every month. And it's one arm of the business that can make the business more fruitful and stable. We do a lot of business office lunch giveaways, up to 10, 20 people, whatever you want. And we generate a list of businesses in the area. And we also ask them, how many times do you order catering? And yeah, it's awesome. And also you might want to consider running Google ads for this as well, because I love Google ads because it's at the budgets that most restaurants have. It's actually pretty hard to waste money on Google ads. When you run ads on social media, if the creative isn't good or the offer sucks, you can be pouring money down the drain. Whereas with Google ads, your ad basically just shows up in front of people who are searching for what you have to offer. And Google has also done a really good job for local businesses at showing what you're getting in terms of direction lookups, in terms of website views, in terms of even in some cases reservations, in terms of calls, which is a really high buying intent activity. If someone calls your restaurant, the odds that they're going to do business with your restaurant is like really high. Anyways, so events, catering attraction, website optimization, you want this basic stuff, you want it to be designed for speed, obviously mobile friendly, and you want to have things on there that cause people to convert. So maybe you have like an X intent pop-up saying, hey, before you go, I want you to have this thing, enter your email here and you'll get it, right? So another way to build up that database. So yeah, that's Website, there's websites that are a whole can of worms. Social media ads. So yeah, it's social media ads. We actually primarily focus on Facebook and Instagram. The one thing I will say is I do think that I think awareness ads are a really big missed opportunity. Advertising on social in general is a missed opportunity. Most restaurants are just like they're playing the organic game, so they're not putting any money into the machine. And where I say generating reviews is a high leverage opportunity, I think that just posting on organic social media is a fairly low leverage opportunity because you don't actually have a ton of control over how many people see your messages and over time it can become less and less as that seems to be the case. So advertising on the other hand, even just awareness ads. So say you have a really simple way to think about this is you could just look at your content from the last 60 to 90 days, take the top performing reels or posts or whatever, and then go into Meta Ads Manager and run the top performing 5 to 10 piece of content as ads and just do it in like a 1 to 3 kilometer radius around your restaurant, depending on where you are. And you could spend $5 a day, and that can actually go quite a long ways. And a really simple way to measure that is just look at how many people see your organic content and then look at how many people see your ads for $5 a day. You will probably be flabbergasted at the difference in impressions, right? That's how I think about that. You also want to consider running offers. So, right, like some direct response advertising so we can build up that database and get new guests in. So I know that's a lot, but we have included a little checklist in the workbook for you. And this is another way I look at growth. It's this in a different format, just maybe a simpler format. When we talk to restaurants, it's like the system that we share with them. And I share this because each one of these steps has like a pretty clear goal. Sometimes we knock it out of the park, other times we don't. But at least if we're executing this outcome focused system, we increase our surface area for success. I'll say when I got started with the guest magnet method, which is just where we barter an offer, buy one, get one or whatever to build up the database. We retarget those folks who opt in to remind them of the offer. We also build out reminder and deadline sequences, blah, blah. And that was all I did. But what I found out over time is offers don't always work. And also sometimes some places don't always want to run an offer. I think that they should always have something out there because you can also exclude audiences who are in your database, right? So you can always be generating new customers, new guests for your restaurants or for your restaurant. And so that's what I used to always do, but I felt like that was a one-legged stool. So that's why we built out a more robust system that just increased our odds for success. So yeah. And again, the goal with our guest magnet method is 50 to 100 guests per month and or guest funded advertising and list building. So what I mean by that is say we're spending $1,000 a month on ads. Ideally, we want to see that we're generating at least $1,000 in revenue, at least like bare minimum, because then the revenue that's coming in is at least paying for the ads. So it liquidates that spend. And then we have this asset, the communication asset, that we can build a flywheel effect long term. So anyways, this is all basically the same as this, but it's just a bit of a simpler way of thinking about it. So that's pretty much it. If you want to go into more detail about any of this, just head to guestgetter.co/schedule. It's totally free. We can build out that roadmap for you. I also just want to go over to the where's it, the book, and just go over. You have access to all this stuff. There's the budget calculator thing, and then there's cost marketing calculator. Here's how we approach the 3 growth prongs, the 7 core story video framework, and then this is where the rubber meets the road. Okay, so quarter one, what are you going to share? Is it how we got started? Is it that time I made the worst sandwich of my life, plus what I learned, right? Like you can get really creative with it. And then as we go down, the revenue initiatives. What are the revenue initiatives you will implement? So January, March, May, July, September, November. If over the course of the year, you're like, you know what, we want to do these every month, so be it, right? But a really simple way to plan for growth. And then finally, are you a team member? Is anyone consistently nailing the fundamentals, right? And so that's all there as a checklist. Anyways, that's all I got for today. We went a little over. We got a little bit of a late start because the link debacle, my bad. But yeah, if you have any questions or you want to dive into this stuff a bit more, you can email me, kyle@guestgetter.co, and I'm happy to shoot the breeze, happy to exchange ideas, give any insights where I can. And yeah, we'll follow up with an email that has these resources and this recording as well. So that is it. thank you so much for your time and attention. I don't take it for granted. We'll see you next time. Cheers.